Okay, everyone. I think we'll get started. So, hello and good morning to you all, ladies and gents. My name is Stephen Beer. I'm Managing Director of Bridgeall, and I'd like to offer you a very warm welcome this morning to our virtual roundtable. When I say roundtable, that's really the feel that we're trying to create with you all today. I can see that we have, circa 40 odd people coming up online at the moment. So, if we're all in a physical room, then it would be a pretty big table and be difficult to coordinate our questions and comments. However, given that we're virtual, that's made easier. So from the outset, really are encouraging you to interact with us and submit any points or questions that you'd like to make throughout the session. So to do that, you just click the speech bubble icon in the team session and enter your message at the bottom right of the meeting chat panel. So throughout the session, we'll be reviewing the messages and we'll refer to these in the roundtable question slots. So with minimal housekeeping over, just before we move into the main speakers, just a few words about who Bridgeall are. So that's our office, not the one in the centre, but the one on the left-hand side. And very beautiful offices they are too. And if you move on, Ryan, those are offices we've not been able to use, like all yourselves, over the past nine to 10 months or so. So what do Bridgeall do? Bridgeall help companies build their modern intelligent workplace. We help, once it's built, we help manage that for them, and we support them all along the way in terms of applications and infrastructure and cloud. And we do have our own products in the innovation space and also in the water sector. So essentially we're here and have been here for 18 years to advise companies, to help them build and implement the right solutions, and also to support them along the journey. In terms of our credentials, we are an 8 times gold partner in the Microsoft ecosystem, which is unique in Scotland as far as we know. We develop all the range of technologies that they have. We're also a cloud solutions provider, which essentially means that we have preferential pricing and support from Microsoft, which plays well for our clients as well. And we do have all the quality certifications and information security certifications you'd expect. In terms of customers, we have a range of customers, so we're not in any one particular sector. We do have experience in water, both in Scotland and England, but we have a whole range of customers you'll see there, and we've got one of them talking with us today. So just to move on to the topic of today, last June when I introduced our first virtual roundtable of this Surviving to Thriving series, I said then that we were living through exceptional times, both as citizens and organisations. Little did we know that 8 months later, we'd unfortunately be in an arguably worse, certainly stricter environment. So whilst recently we've certainly got some room for optimism given the vaccination programmes, we will continue to face and deal with adverse conditions medically, socially and economically for some time. However, referring to the same motto I used the last time, out of adversity comes opportunity, we all have to focus positively on planning and looking forward. So some 8 months later, we thought it would be a good idea to focus today on the very relevant topic of building business resiliency. So it's a wide topic, of course, but today we have 2 key speakers and a guest contributor who I know will deliver perspectives that offer interesting food for thought for you all. So first up, we have Dr. Jim Hamill, and Jim's going to be outlining emerging best practice in this area. Jim has over 35 years experience in international management education, has authored several books and numerous papers and is focused on creating business leaders fit for purpose in the digital era. So he's well placed to throw his comments and his views and the assessment of what he's been reading and researching on. Following Jim's talk, there'll be an opportunity to address questions to Jim, so please drop those into the message chat and I'll compare them with Jim. The second presentation will be led by Ken Wilcox, who is our Head of Cloud Services at Bridgeall. Ken has over 30 years experience in IT and in helping businesses build resiliency with a focus on infrastructure, design, operations and security. So well placed to comment on the practicalities and opportunities in this area. And finally, we're also very pleased that Ken Fox, Head of ICT at Link Group, has agreed to contribute his thoughts today. Link Group is one of the largest social landlords in Scotland, and Ken will talk about their experiences in building resiliency in practice. Ken and his team, I know, are a very forward-looking outfit, so there will be some valuable insights noted from this. So I hope and I'm sure that you'll hear some interesting experiences today in the discussions, and I'll now pass over to Jim to move forward with the first session.
Okay, Stephen, thank you, and thanks for asking me to present the first session today. And hello and welcome to everyone. Thanks for joining us at this Bridgeall Building Resilience in the Modern Intelligent Workplace session. I don't like talking about myself, so for those who don't know me too well, I've been operating in the digital area since the days of 26k modems, which gives you some idea of what age I am. And I'm due to get my COVID vaccine on Saturday. Okay, my role is simply to set the scene for the rest of the session. And to provide the background to it. So if you move to the next slide, Ryan, please. The background to the session is really the wrecking ball of COVID-19. And we all know what impact that's had on our personal lives, and if anybody's lost loved ones as a consequence of COVID, then my thoughts are with you. But our focus today is how COVID-19 has impacted on business, and we know what impact it has had, so how do we build resilience moving forward? Now, just to set the scene, and it's captured quite nicely in that cartoon, I think digital transformation is years away. I don't see our company having to change anytime soon, and then all of a sudden we get the wrecking ball of COVID-19. And I hear many commentators saying that we have seen 10 years of digital transformation in the last 10 months. And certainly digital has been absolutely essential to our organisation's ability to survive and get through the last 10 months. But have we really transformed anything? Yes, we have digitised, but have we really transformed the way we do business? And if you move to the next slide, Ryan, thanks. Picking up on a comment that Stephen made there, the background and the scene setting for today is really the thought that COVID-19, by unfreezing a lot of past constraints and routines, habits, norms, traditional ways of doing things around here, it basically has provided us with a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to transform the way we do things, whether we are a public sector organisation, a housing association, a higher education institution, or whatever sector we're in. It gives us a massive opportunity for excising the legacy structures, the legacy technologies, and Ken Wilcox will talk more about the technology aspect, but also the legacy leadership and management thinking that has historically stifled innovation. It gives us a massive opportunity if we are ready to seize the moment. It gives us a massive opportunity for building the resilient, modern, intelligent workplaces that are going to be an absolute essential for a VUCAD world. And the term VUCA is a term that was used historically by the American Army to describe a volatile, uncertain, complex and ambiguous world. And if we just add digital to the end of that, then we get VUCA, which is the type of world that we're living in. And it's an abbreviation that you might want to be very careful how you pronounce it if you're bringing it up in future meetings. So my role today, Ryan, if you want to move to the next slide, my role today is to very quickly run through with you what is kind of emerging as emerging best practice thinking in this area. As one would imagine, there's an awful lot been written about the business impact and the business response to the pandemic, and really what I'm going to try and do today is to take a very wide range of studies that have been done and try to present it to you in about 10 minutes. And one of the key points I want to try and get across is that most of the approaches and frameworks to things like strategy development, leadership, how we operate as a business, really were not built for an era of perpetual, pervasive and exponential change. You know, I've spent a long time in one of the UK's top business schools, and we really do need to question now a lot of the frameworks and approaches. We're living in a volatile world where even for the most agile company, the pace of change is so fast that it's actually very difficult for even the most responsive and agile of organisations to respond to that. So Ryan, if you jump to the next slide, please. So there's a very, as I said, there's a very large number of studies been done in this area, and I've tried to summarise the key points in 4 main headings. And I'll talk through 3 of them, and Ken Fox will talk through the technology aspect. So we've got a strategy aspect to this. We've got an OPC aspect, an organisation, people and culture aspect, and we've got a leadership aspect. So what I'm going to do now is just very briefly summarise emerging best practice thinking in these 3 areas, to reinforce a comment that Stephen made. We do want to make this as interactive as possible, so please avail yourself of the chat forum. If you've got a comment to make, you want to provide a little bit of feedback, a question to ask, if you want to respond to someone else's comment, then by all means feel free to do so. And the use of the chat forum here is an interesting aspect of what we're going to go on and talk about now, where we need to kind of reimagine how we do everything. If I was presenting at a face-to-face conference, it would be considered exceptionally bad manners if the audience started talking to each other while I was speaking. On this platform, that talking to each other through the chat forum is actually actively encouraged, and that was a lesson I learned very, very quickly in the pandemic when I taught a 5-day MBA programme at Edinburgh University, where the students started to take control of the agenda, and that was an interesting experience. So Ryan, if you jump to the strategy one. Okay, so again, I'm going to run through this quickly, just keeping it very top level and trying to explain what emerging best practice thinking here. One of the terms that I don't think makes any sense at all in this whole area is the term new normal. To me, the new normal is going to be a prolonged period of turbulent, unpredictable, uncertain change. As one author described it, it's an era of 3D change, perpetual, pervasive and exponential. With the threat of disruption coming from a whole range of different sources, now we can no longer rely on traditional approaches and frameworks to strategy development. We need to question things like 3 and 5 year plans. The essence of strategy now, in the view of experts, the essence of strategy is adaptability, speed of response to unanticipated shocks, expecting the unexpected, rebounding quickly and taking advantage of unforeseen circumstances. And that does raise a number of questions for our organisations. And as I go through this, I am going to present this as questions to you, and hopefully it's questions that you can take away and think about in the context of your own organisation. And I'm quite sure that many of you have made progress in some of the areas that we are going to talk about today. But before we go on to talking about building resilience, I think there is a question: what do we mean by resilience, and what type of world are we building resilience for? And the question there is, does our organisation have some type of sense-making system in place? Some type of robust and proactive system for making sense of the environment that we're living in? I think the main point I want to get across in terms of the strategy aspect here is whether it is sufficient for our organisations to be tinkering with our approach to strategy, or whether we need to be adopting a more radical, a more blue ocean, and what's known as a scorched earth approach to strategy development, given the world that we're living in. And the scorched earth approach is really an approach where a brainstorming session, the senior management team, what you do is you burn down all the core assumptions underlying how your industry and how your organisation operates, and then you start to build a new approach based on the ashes of the old approach. And it's a very interesting approach to work through at a senior management level. And one of the key questions there is, how would an agile, well-funded startup business totally disrupt your industry and your organisation? A company, an organisation that isn't constrained by the legacy thinking and the legacy technologies and the legacy operational approaches of well-established companies. And the best way I can try and get that message across is if we just think of some examples here, and it's actually not that difficult to think of examples. Probably the easiest one to get the message across here is if we think of restaurants. The traditional business model of a restaurant is where you book a table and you go and you eat in that restaurant. And now that clearly has not been possible for a lot of the last 10 or 11 months. So how have restaurants responded to that? Yes, they've tinkered at the edges by offering home delivery service or pickup services. But what if the pandemic has triggered a fundamental and permanent change in people's eating habits, and they want to continue eating from home? And there's predictions that what we're going to see here is the emergence of virtual kitchens. Kitchens that don't operate as restaurants, they basically just operate as home delivery services. The same type of approach can apply in a whole range of issues. We're seeing a major discussion taking place just now about home learning, whether that's in universities or particularly at school level, and we're focusing on the the personal issues and the family aspects of that quite correctly. But I think we're actually missing a trick here, and maybe the discussion should be more about how we can leverage the full potential of technology to reimagine the whole education sector, to reimagine pedagogy, the method of teaching, and to reimagine how we assess young people. In terms of, you know, local authorities, housing associations, and I know there's a number of housing associations in the group today, how do we get to a situation where, with our customers expecting Amazon level type customer service, how can we as an organisation get close to providing that service? So in every industry that I can think of, there is a need to reassess and reimagine our approach to strategy. And I don't think old approaches work anymore. And I'm happy to take any questions on that in a moment. Ryan, do you want to move to the next slide? Okay, in terms of OPC, organisation, people and culture, there's a whole range of issues here. I'll touch on them briefly. I think even before the pandemic, it was becoming clear that organisations, that the core to success in those organisations was people, and increasingly the purpose and values of that organisation. And that has only been reinforced by COVID. Indeed, some people argue that it should actually be the HR department that are responsible for our digital transformation, simply because people are absolutely at the core of this. A paper just published the other day there, which is not in the slides here, but let me summarise it just very quickly. It's a paper that was published by McKinsey, and they identified what they call 9 traits of a future ready organisation. Just published the other day there. And the 9 traits are purpose, values, culture as the secret sauce, radically flat. What they mean obviously by that is a flat organisation that makes decisions very quickly, turbocharged decision making, focus on talent, embracing collaboration, not only internally, but in many cases embracing collaboration with competitors and your ecosystem, data and accelerated learning. And those are many of the challenges that our organisations will be facing. I would probably add 2 things to that list. First of all, technology, the importance of digital, and Ken will obviously talk more about that. And the thing I would add is the importance of leadership. And the essence of this is that building a resilient and future ready organisation will not only require the right technology to be in place, and the technology aspect obviously is absolutely critical, and Ken will talk about that, but it will also require radical changes to the way we operate, our approach to people and culture. A recent book called Humanocracy by one of the best known authors in this area, Gary Hamel, no relation, it's spelled H-E-M-E-L, estimated that the cost of excessive bureaucracy across the countries of the OECD, that the cost of excessive bureaucracy was $9 trillion per year. And in my experience, that cost of bureaucracy doesn't just happen in large organisations, it happens in small organisations. So for us, as I said, I'm going to present this as a series of questions. So for us as organisations, the questions are, how do we try and excise bureaucratic structures that stifle innovation? How do we empower our people? How do we create high-performing teams? It's now widely accepted that the key to successful transformation is small, agile, empowered teams working on projects that deliver value in months rather than years. How can we build agile, empowered teams when numerous studies show that levels of employee engagement around the world are sitting at somewhere like 15 and 20% pre-pandemic, and probably less than that now. So how can we empower staff, empower teams, when fewer than 20% of our employees feel engaged with the organisations that they work for? And it was Peter Drucker that said, culture eats strategy every time. So we need to focus, and how the question is, how do we build a new organisational culture fit for purpose in a volatile, uncertain and predictable world? You really do want to avoid what happened the other day there in a very large, well-known company, where the chairman in a Zoom meeting with 1,500 staff basically told them to stop moaning about the pandemic and basically just get on with it. We need to start paying more attention, I think, to the side effects of remote working, the well-being and mental health, efficiency and effectiveness of our employees, because the evidence now is overwhelming that for a lot of staff that creates well-being, mental health issues. People are being anxious, nervous and depressed, and certainly over the last few months I've been very anxious, nervous and depressed, but that's more to do with the football team I support than anything else. We know that our staff are suffering from change fatigue. We know that for a fact. So a lot of issues there. And Ryan, if you just jump to the next slide. The bottom line in all of this for me, and this emerges clearly from the literature. What we're talking about here, I think, goes right to the heart of the leadership concept itself. And there's a growing amount of research here that we might need to reimagine the whole concept of leadership for a VUCAD world. And if that is the case, what new approaches are required? You know, again, the research indicates that fewer than a third of employees actually trust the leadership in their organisation. We know that on a macro level, there's been a total loss of trust in institutions and politicians and politics. How do we regain that trust back? And there's a growing body of evidence that serious questions are now being asked about the traditional, what's known as Churchillian leadership approach, the heroic leader who leads the troops into battle, and a leader who is put on a pedestal. The leaders who will succeed in a VUCAD world are those who show a little bit of humility, are more humane, approachable, authentic. They accept that they might not have all the answers because we're living in a world of great uncertainty. We need leaders who have the ability to hear and listen to what they need to hear, not just what they want to hear, and first and foremost, in my view, we need leaders who create leaders. We need to democratise leadership in our organisations. So one useful tool there is to think of the 3 E's there. What leadership approaches in our organisation that we've traditionally adopted are becoming eroding. In other words, they're beginning to endanger our organisation's success. What leadership approaches are enduring? They've made sense and they'll always make sense. But what new approaches are emerging? So just to wrap up here and see if there's any issues we can pick up on from the forum. 2 more slides, Ryan, just very quickly. So it's not, sorry, skip the next one. Ken's going to be talking about the technology aspect. Okay, so the next question is obviously, you know, what next steps? Okay, building a resilient modern workplace doesn't happen overnight. It's a journey, not a destination, and Ken will talk at length about the technology aspect of this. Based on the literature that I've just summarised, it's being suggested that a 60-day sprint approach is useful to get started here. And Ryan, if you just go to my final slide here, and I don't want to dwell on this too much because I want to try and open this up now. But really what the evidence is suggesting is that across those 4 areas, strategy, organisation, people, culture, leadership and technology, what we need to do is basically 3 things. We need to reassess or reevaluate where we are and whether our traditional approach to strategy, organisation, people, leadership actually makes sense anymore. Reassessing the gap that exists between the way we've always done things and the way we need to do them in the future. And then based on that, we then re-energise. We re-energise our strategy. We realign our strategy to the new reality. In terms of organisation, we empower people, we re-energise the culture, we reimagine leadership. And for technology, we mend the gap. We know there's going to be a gap between our technology maturity and where we need to be in this new world. And that obviously is something that, again, that Ken will pick up on. And then based on that, we relaunch the strategy, we relaunch, we unleash the creative power of our teams. So hopefully you found that useful. There is a paper that I have published on LinkedIn that examine these issues in a bit more detail, with including all the references that went into that summary. So if you are interested in digging any deeper into those issues, just check out my LinkedIn profile. You'll see in there one of the articles I published about 2 weeks ago that summarise these issues. Okay, thank you for listening to me. I wanted to be very brief on that. Stephen, is there anything sorry, before I pass on to Stephen, we're going to try and pick up 1 or 2 questions here. If we don't pick up your comment, I will be looking at the chat forum when I finish speaking, and I'll try and get back to you using text as well. As you know, men can't multitask, so I can't really speak and check the chat forum at the same time. Stephen, was there anything in particular that?
Yes, Jim. Yes, we'll get 2 or 3 questions just to pose to you. There's one burning one at the end. There's a number of interesting comments as well, so I'll leave you to maybe comment on back to them during the chats. But the first one up was from John Bowron. So Jim is saying, Jim, adaptation has been a staple of every strategy for years.
Sorry, say that first word there, Stephen.
So adaptation or adaptability, the adaptive strategy, I suppose, has been a staple of every strategy for years. So how new is it really?
Yeah. So the question is it really or is it new?
So how new is it really?
How new? Yeah. Okay, John. I think my answer to that is, of course, every strategy needs to have adaptability and responsiveness built into it. Yeah, so you're perfectly correct in saying that. I think the obvious response I would give is that now that adaptability needs to be adaptability on steroids, in the sense that the pace of change that we're seeing, not just pandemic induced change, which is obviously a major focus today, but even without the pandemic, we are moving into a completely new second wave of digital disruption, with the emergence of technologies such as IoT, big data, artificial intelligence, and so on. And again, that just speeds up the need to be adaptable and responsive, John. So I think I would agree with you. I think we're living in turbulent, uncertain times, John. So I just think that level of adaptability needs to be adaptability on steroids.
Okay, good one, Jim. So Tony McClelland's posed one for you, Jim. Kind of question and the kind of comment as well. So his point is, how do we avoid everything being tactical? Surely increasing agility and resilience needs both a short and a longer term view. Understanding that perhaps it's starting with the end in mind might no longer be truly possible.
Okay, again, an excellent question, Tony, and I think you're right. We need to combine the tactical and the more, let's say, the more radical, and that actually, Tony, has been key to a lot of the literature in this area, where depending on who the author is, they have basically identified maybe three stages that organisations are going through now, and those three stages are centrally important to what Ken's going to be talking about. So the first stage was a very tactical stage, Tony, induced by the outbreak of the pandemic last March, and that was a survival stage. What the hell do we need to do to survive this? As Stephen said in his introduction, we're now at the stage where we're seeing a little bit of light at the end of the tunnel, and the next stage, I think, is building that resilience, Tony, which I think is still a kind of tactical issue. How do we build the resilience to get us through the next stage of this? And then the third stage, which is really the stage I was talking about, it's the kind of reimagine stage. What is it we need to do for this new unpredictable world? So good question, Tony, and I hope I've kind of answered it properly, but yeah, it's a difficult area.
Yeah. Okay, third one, Jim, of 4. So from Paul Haney, what place does regulation have in the new agile / innovative / resilient business world, Jim?
Okay, Paul, thanks. It's a difficult one to answer because I'm not sure what Paul means by regulation, but again, Paul, if you apply the thinking in the presentation there, is it time to reimagine, reinvent, rethink a lot of the regulatory controls that we have? I suppose the financial services sector is a good example of that. When I talk about digital transformation of financial services in MBA classes, where a lot of the participants are from the financial services sector in Edinburgh, the answer I always get is we can't do that because we're so heavily regulated, blah, blah, blah. And yet we're seeing a massive growth in the fintech industry now. So, yeah, it's a good question, Paul.
Okay, fourth and final one that I'll pose here, Jim. There are some others that, again, just due to time, I'll probably leave you to answer in the message forum, Jim. But I think it's a question posed by Sean Sadler. I think Sean probably knows the answer, but who do you support?
Well, do you want me to answer that?
No, I think probably everybody knows, given the
I think if a man's is nervous and depressed, I think the answer to that's pretty clear.
Yes, indeed. Okay, Jim, thanks very much for your input there.
Sorry, Stephen, as I said, I'll pick up on any other comments on the forum just now.
Yes, exactly. Okay, thanks, Jim.
Thank you.
And we'll move on to Ken now. So over to you, Ken.
Thanks, Stephen. Good morning, everyone, and thanks for your time today. I think I'm a little bit like Jim to a certain extent. He certainly doesn't support Liverpool or the England rugby team, so hopefully I won't be getting any questions about those subjects today. My name's Ken Wilcox. I'm Head of Cloud Services and Support for Bridgeall. I've been at Bridgeall over the past 9 years, working with businesses to achieve their goals for digital transformation through the implementation of cloud services. The rate of change in this time has been immense, and the demand for these services has grown significantly over the past 2 to 3 years. Can we just jump the slide, Ryan? Thanks. So today I'll be covering from a technology perspective. We want to look at the challenges faced to moving to remote working. We're also going to look at how the cloud has helped businesses survive the pandemic. And then I'd like to introduce you to Ken Fox of Link Group, and he's going to talk about their experiences and how they met the challenges we all faced. And then finally, we're going to look at opportunities for improvement now and post COVID-19. Gartner survey shows just 12% of organisations were highly prepared for dealing with the pandemic. If my maths are correct, that's 88% of companies were not prepared, although some might not have been sure. I'm certain the majority of us here today had a robust business continuity plan in place. We'd planned for losing a server, maybe an application, a whole data center or an entire office, but this was different. This was a whole different ballgame. Most of you will be familiar with the challenges we faced moving from an office of many to many offices of one. I can recall these challenges from experiences in my own house. Bridgeall managed to transition seamlessly into the remote working environment with about a week prior to normal lockdown being announced by the government. However, my partner Susan, she continued travelling into work every day. Remote work wasn't something a company was geared up for. But eventually, when the full lockdown did come, she had to stay at home, unable to do any work for several weeks. As a key worker, it was critical she was working, so they established remote access through a VMware desktop. Although at the time, this could only be done using their own home PC, delays procuring a new corporate laptop. She had a desktop PC in the office. The access, it required several steps to get connected to the desktop PC. She'd load VMware desktop up, enable a VPN client, and then RDP across. It was a complex and problematic. I became a personal IT technician several times every single day. I need to send her a bill for that one, Stephen, I think. As with many companies, Microsoft Teams was rapidly pushed out. The company had already started on the journey to 365, but had only managed to set up identity synchronization. This allowed them to log into Teams using their AD credentials. Her teammates could now communicate, not on the remote desktop system though. She had to minimize this and access Teams on the local device. It didn't work through the VMware. A real can of worms, and not something for your average user to work around in an already stressful situation. Daily problems were occurring, accessing the systems and losing connection. Calls between our teammates discussing who could connect and who couldn't. Was there a problem with them, or was the server down? The systems, they just simply couldn't cope, or the users had forgotten the steps necessary for them to gain access. A month later, when a company laptop finally did arrive, it wasn't fully set up. It needed admin credentials, and the IT support took another few weeks to get this resolved. The support team were literally swamped with the calls that were coming in. Security has been one of the biggest challenges we've all faced, and this continues. To facilitate remote working, security policies may have been relaxed or bypassed altogether. And cyber criminals, they've not been slow to take advantage of this situation. We've seen a 31% increase during the pandemic. They've been targeting home networks and Internet of Things devices. Social engineering in particular is on the rise. My mobile, as with many, has never been so busy. I've had loads of calls. I'm sure many of you have seen these, but I think, reciting a couple of examples, we've got a call from Microsoft. I've got a problem with my computer apparently, and they're walking me through the process of gaining remote access. I persevered with them one day and let them go through the whole process, but I did stop at the last minute before letting them get connected. I'm also getting repeated calls at the moment telling me my national insurance number's been compromised and they're trying to steal my personal data. Patching and Windows updates. It's going to have been easy to miss these routine operational activities with the IT resources overstretched or unavailable. And if I refer back to the statement, moving from an office of many to many offices of one, our legacy systems for monitoring and managing PCs and laptops, likes of System Center and WSUS, they wouldn't be suitable for the remote the remote workforce working in many offices of one. If I now move to our focus to the cloud adoption, there's absolutely no doubt that companies further along the road to using public cloud services have found it much easier to adjust to the challenges I've just discussed. The pandemic's clearly identified the benefits of the cloud. We've been able to rapidly deploy services and quickly adjust quantities, scale, or shrink. Shrinking could be reducing licenses on a month-to-month basis, not something those on an EA agreement or a fixed-term contract probably ever saw. Bridgeall, as a CSP license provider, allowed the companies to reduce subscription quantities while staff have been on furlough or cuts have been made. Would you have been able to save any money over the past year if your license provider were able to do this? The cloud's become vital for keeping the majority of our businesses running, with the adoption growing significantly in 2020, particularly for services like Teams, Slack, or Zoom. It's provided us with all the tools necessary to work effectively, accessible to both large enterprises and small businesses, but even one-man bands. Microsoft's been at the forefront of providing these cloud tools through the SaaS apps in Office 365 and through the Azure data centers. Office 365 is now used by over 1 million companies worldwide, and Bridgeall's helped many businesses, public and private sector, successfully implement the cloud services. Throughout 2020, during the height of the pandemic, we worked with the Security Industry Authority. They were a department in the UK Home Office. We looked at moving Exchange, SharePoint, and Skype for Business to their online equivalents. And the project was delivered to over 300 users working remotely from home. Now, we obviously didn't complete this without any issues, but these were mostly due to, home users' poor internet circuits. Maybe users weren't following the instructions on a regular basis as well. And they certainly weren't available on the agreed time slots we'd given them. The project manager the project manager for the client side described the situation as trying to herd cats. Azure, this has provided us with PaaS and IaaS services that can simplify remote working. We've enabled secure remote access to legacy apps hosted on premises through the use of Azure AD proxy services. We've also implemented a Windows desktop system during 2020 for a global company. This started as a proof of concept comparing against their current Citrix farm, which was due to be upgraded. We were able to show significant benefits in both performance and the cost, so we progressed straight into a full deployment for hundreds of users across the globe. The system then extended into a hybrid configuration. We had legacy apps hosted in a Glasgow data center, making use of Microsoft's network backbone to reduce the latency from Singapore and Mumbai users. I'd like to pause for a minute and invite Ken Fox, he's head of ICT and digital services for Link Group, to talk about their experiences and how they met the challenges during the pandemic.
Yeah, good morning, Ken. Good morning, everybody. Ken Fox speaking today from sunny Falkirk. It's great to be able to say that. I've been at home now for almost 12 months. I've got a 7-year-old downstairs who may just appear on screen at any moment. I'm sure some of you recognise that experience, and if there's any strange noises, again, I'll blame the 7-year-old as opposed to myself. Yeah, so in terms of the Link Group, just by way of a small bit of context, if you don't know us, the Link Group are based in Edinburgh. We're a group of award-winning companies. We're about 700 strong at the moment and based near the Corn Exchange. We have 12 main office locations, which are largely empty. And as Ken Wilcox said, all our teams are now at home, working away, and thankfully, effectively and efficiently. What I'm not going to do this morning is try and say that what we've done in any way is best practice or the best model. It's just the thing we've done. And we all have challenges. We all have different skill sets. We have different people and different setups. But by sharing what we have experienced, perhaps for one or two of you, you'll think, oh, great, it's not just me. Or yeah, I recognize that. And actually, we haven't done so bad in your own particular case. So it's more from that perspective that I'd like to say a few words this morning. The digital team, my small team, and Jim Hamill speaks a lot about people and leadership. And thankfully, we started our digital journey, our digital transformation, if you like, a number of years ago. And if we hadn't started that and started our transition to the cloud, I really think we would have been in great trouble because we had everything on-prem. Everything was being managed by a single person. One of the things I've noticed from, our housing association and perhaps others which are small, we often have a single person who knows about that or another single person who knows about something else. So that's a risk to us. So by starting our journey and moving things to the cloud, I hope we've very much in many ways tried to protect ourselves and protect the business. So in terms of my team, again, just to give you some context, we're set up in a fairly traditional format, I think, in terms of design, build, transition and operate, with the teams positioned to deliver on that model. First line support is delivered through our service desk, and we have Vivantio as our ticketing system, and my team provides second line support as you'd expect. We call upon Bridgeall, Netitude, Arian, and a host of other providers to provide our third line support to make that model work for us. And it is our model. I'm not saying it's the best model in the world, but it seems to work for Link, and I'm very thankful for that in the current environment. Now, naturally, of course, with COVID, it wasn't just Link that had problems. The third line support were laying people off in terms of furlough. So even that part of my support model started to fall down. Bridgeall thankfully remained there, which was great, but there were difficulties in that area. So at the time of COVID, we were already in a period of transition. And by that, I don't just mean, technology, because one of the things I keep saying to the team and for me is we need to understand where do we want to play and how do we want to win. And I don't want the team to be playing back in the gubbins of the infrastructure. For us, I want that to be managed somewhere else and delivering reliable and continuous service. So that's really important for us. But how did things affect us? Well, Ken's quite right. Thankfully, we've moved to Office 365 about 18 months prior to that, away from a complete on-prem environment, and having that ability to access our productivity suite from the cloud enabled us to have a fairly seamless move out into the home working environment. And naturally, those of you who are heads of, directors of, or whatever, you know the pain that we could have suffered if that didn't happen. And you're then in a position of firefighting all the time. So thankfully, by luck, planning, good judgment, or whatever it may have been, our move out from the office locations into our home working worked extremely well for us. So I was really pleased with that. But of course, at home then you had people who then, with a variety of broadband, a variety of configurations, who naturally don't understand, in many cases, were saying, well, hang on, this is all rubbish, I can't get connected. But they've built an office 50 meters away from the router, or they've gone up into the attic. So little things from the help desk team, such as, can you move closer to your router? Can you turn your video off? Tiny little things actually made a great difference. And we as a team learned the hard way about these hints and tips. And I'm sure you have as well. But again, it's just our experience at the Link Group, what we did. The other area I had a problem with, and I was convinced that somebody was deliberately trying to scupper any thoughts I had of succeeding, as we tried to implement a new wide area network, and we started that piece of work again about 8 months just before lockdown. The BT infrastructure, I couldn't get the fibre through the ducts. There was water problems, there was access problem, there was rats, and there was a pandemic. I was convinced somebody was trying to prevent us from actually getting that new wide area network in. And why did I want it in? Well, the old one we had could only support 60 concurrent users. I've got a business of 700. I'm going into a pandemic. My God, what a disaster. So thankfully, after a couple of weeks of lockdown, we managed to complete that piece of work, which again took away a huge amount of pressure for us, which was great. We had to get used to the whole cloud utility model, the whole SaaS environment, and how we would actually operate within the cloud. And that does take a bit of time, a bit of getting used to. And within the home working environment and COVID, even though we were in COVID, people wanted to work different hours. They have school children. A number of comments today I think are really helpful from those on the call, saying leadership, people, staff, balance, absolutely right. And what we tried to do was make sure that the technology was always available. So if you needed to start early or start late, it would again be seamless for you. In the early days, I think Microsoft struggled, or my experience is that Microsoft struggled, because we were bringing the systems down after, we'll say, 7 or 8 o'clock at night to try and save some money in terms of the utility model. But Microsoft didn't seem to be able to bring them back up again the next morning. Now, I don't know if that was just an experience of Link or if that was something others also saw. But that meant we then decided to just keep the servers running 24/7 because I couldn't afford them not to come up the next morning in terms of work. In terms of our housing management system, we ended up being the first in the country to have Arian hosted. Lots of people have Arian, but they never had a hosted. I wanted a SaaS solution, but they didn't have one. And I never like to be first. And many of you will be the same. There's times it's good to be first, but I didn't want to be first into this particular situation. But we were faced with a burning platform. We were faced with a number of things we needed to achieve in terms of reliability. So we worked with Arian to develop a solution so that we, again, had access to that system all the time. Other things we experienced was the I want that one scenario, where we had Teams, we had a number of tools to use, but people saw Zoom, we want WhatsApp, we want everything else. So we spent a bit of time just trying to calm down, the options available to the workforce and zone in on the things that are best for us. I think as a team, we coped reasonably well. we were blessed with support, and I'm not just saying this because I'm on the call. We had Ken and his team helping us with configurations and helping us calm down the environment. But we know we've got a lot to do. We're no way a finished product, and we're trying to answer the question, and we haven't done it. You know, what opportunities has the new normal, if there is such a thing, when I listen to Jim, given us, and how will this affect the way we work in the future? Lots of questions, but thankfully we're now in a stable environment and working very effectively from home. That's my wee bit, Ken.
Thanks, Ken. That was interesting. Interesting to hear how you and the team handled the pandemic at Link. So I'd like to finish this part of the session looking at where we go to next and how we can improve on what's been achieved to date. We identified earlier that security has been and continues to be one of the biggest challenges. There's many reasons why we should look to the cloud when trying to make our systems more secure. Businesses couldn't shake a stick at the annual $1 billion Microsoft spend on security. They actually fend off 7 trillion cyber threats every day. If we keep the focus on how our data can be impacted, and traditionally this has been done through securing our network perimeter, but this has become more and more difficult with our data all over the place. We're on servers in SaaS applications, AWS, Google, Azure, data's on laptops and mobile devices too. We should now focus on treating identity as the new security boundary and wrap security around how our users want to work, anytime, any location, or on any device. The cloud can provide us with all the tools necessary to protect our data, to protect our identity, and keep us safe. Many of us on the journey for digital transformation through the implementation of the cloud have started with the Office 365 productivity services. But we should now be looking to progress further into tools that will ensure our data is secure, devices protected, and identity is safe. These tools would include Azure Active Directory Premium services. This can protect users and devices through conditional access policies and multi-factor authentication. It also includes many other features like privileged access management for control and administrator access. Endpoint Manager, this was formerly known as Intune. This is used for device management, MDM, or mobile application management. MAM, as it's known, can allow us to maintain security while permitting staff to use their own devices, giving us BYOD control and governance. Data loss prevention. This can make managing sensitive information easier for us. And Azure Information Protection. This allows us to classify through labeling and protect documents and emails, controlling whether they can be saved, emailed, or even viewed through a Teams meeting on a shared desktop. Advanced Threat Protection brings together AI and machine learning to prevent, detect, and respond to new and sophisticated threats. Cyber criminals have already started to make use of AI and machine learning when formulating their attacks, so we don't want to let them get ahead in the game. You may ask the question, why bother? We didn't apply all these tools and services when working in the traditional way. One of our public sector customers has been on the journey to fully implement cloud services over the past few years, moving to SaaS apps wherever possible. And following COVID, they've made the bold decision never to return to the office to operate permanent remote working strategy. They were already using the Office 365 core services, but still had servers on premises or in Azure. By adding some of the tools just mentioned, primarily Azure AD Premium and Intune, we migrated them to a completely serverless environment. All the users authenticated in the cloud with laptops, desktops, and mobile devices managed, monitored, and updated with Intune. So some of the key benefits for them have been, well, they've fully enabled a secure remote working environment anytime, any location, on any device. Access to data is actually restricted and to only corporate devices, and this is done through conditional access policies. And then through decommissioning of the servers, both on-premise and in Azure, we've made significant cost savings, We simplified and reduced their operational requirements. And from a security perspective, they've reduced their attack surface to cyber threats. I'd like to finish up with a call to action. Adopting new technology quickly can often lead to mistakes. You might be overspending on your cloud infrastructure or your subscriptions. We've actually just reviewed Azure usage for a UK company, and we were able to identify potential savings in the region of £500,000 over the next 5 years. Is your system fully secured? Another Azure review highlighted 85 security vulnerabilities and recommendations covering the network and the servers. And then lastly, have you adopted best practice in how your environments are set up? Is the system resilient? Is it adequately backed up? Do you have a DR plan in place? And did the team who built the environment have expertise, or were they learning as they go? Thanks for your time today. I'd like to hand back to Stephen and Jim and invite you to ask any questions.
Okay, thank you, Ken, for that, and thank you, Ken Fox, for your contribution there. I think what we're going to do here is we'll just open it up to all the presenters just now in terms of any questions, because there's a couple of questions in here. Well, certainly one might be more interesting for Jim to answer. So one of the things I'll put forward is from Lynn Laughlin. Hi, Lynn. So Lynn says, I operate in the social care sector, a sector underfunded and facing many challenges around sustainability. How do you think SME businesses should be supported in the future to be agile, innovative and resilient? So quite a wide question, I think. Interested to hear any of your viewpoints there. I'm thinking maybe Jim in the first instance.
Yeah, it is a difficult one, Lynn, without knowing too much about the exact background. Let me just share a personal experience with you, which might help. My mother-in-law was in a care home for the best part of 6 years with dementia. The level of care she got was absolutely excellent. But we visited the care home one day, and I noticed that a few of the staff seemed to be on their mobile phones quite a lot, which I was a wee bit annoyed about. And when we went back a few days later, the same thing was happening. But one of the members of staff seen me looking at her, and she came up and she said, Jim, it's not what you think it is. We're not on our phones, we're not on Facebook. And what they'd done is they had given the staff a little device where they could input any of the residents' needs, inputting what they had to eat, their toilet facilities, how much they had to drink, which provided them with a one-point contact of all the information that all the staff needed on any of the residents. And that just blew me away, because the only problem we ever had, Lynn, in that care home in terms of the care of my mother-in-law, and the staff were absolutely brilliant, the only problem we ever experienced was an information and lack of communication problem, which was solved overnight at very, very little cost to the care home, just by giving the staff these digital devices. Ken, are you want to pick up on the technology aspects of that?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the points I made about cloud services again is that from a small business, from a small organization, the cloud has enabled access to enterprise grade technology that were on a traditional sense were only ever available to the large enterprise, big companies with big budgets and teams of people to manage. But now through the subscription model, which is obviously can be easily scaled to suit a small organization. You know, every organization has access to the same technology and the same systems. So from that perspective, you know, we're all on an equal playing field, really. And you know, I would see that as the sort of key differentiator now from where we were before.
So Stephen, do you mind if I just come in there very briefly? In terms of Lynn's comment, I've just thought of another example here in the Gary Hamel book, Lynn, and that's Hamel, Hamel, the book called Humanocracy. It actually starts off with an example of a care organisation, I think they're based in the Netherlands, who have become world renowned for the way in which they operate and the way in which they are organised. And effectively, cut a long story short, they're organised into cells. So you have something like 15, 20 carers covering a particular area. They provide care at home. The level of centralisation and hierarchy and command and control is very, very limited. And basically the individual cells operate mainly on a standalone basis, but working within certain parameters, obviously. And the benefits of that are adaptability, responsiveness, agility, and much lower costs, because there's no large hierarchical organisation there. And they're renowned as being one of the most cost and most efficient care organisations in the world. If you want to contact me, I'll send you a link to it and give you the name of the organisation. I just can't remember their name offhand.
Okay, thanks for that, Jim. A question came up from John Bauer on there. Ken, I'm feeling a bit ignorant about your areas. How do I learn more?
I think come and speak to us. There's obviously lots of material out there. You know, we really, you know, would like to know more about your issues and where you are today to sort of provide any sort of detailed input on that. So feel free to come contact us and we can have a call and a session to, you know, see where you are now and provide some advice to how to move forward.
Yeah, that's the same for me, Ken. If John wants to reach out, more than happy to share anything I've got. And
I think there's one other question here that we'll probably finish up on, and then I'll do a quick roundup because we're moving on here. It's actually from Paul Haney, and I have to admit, when it came up, I had to Google this myself. I'd like to think I understand a fair bit about what's going on. So Paul's asked, have you seen much movement on bring your own enhancement, BYOE, during the recent crisis? For two of the panel.
Thanks for that, Stephen. You sure it's not bring your own encryption?
Bring your own
bring your own enhancement.
So I won't prolong your agony if you don't, unless you do understand what it is. It's to do with human augmentation, using technology to augment what humans can do. So as I say, I only know that because I googled it. I'm guessing our panel don't know too much about having seen the rise of that at all.
No, not from my side.
Okay. So you stumped us. Jim, any thoughts now?
Well, if I've not had time to Google it, so if I understand Paul's comment, and apologies if I don't, I mean, we've all heard of the term BOID, which is bring your own device, which obviously is a key issue now in terms of security and so on. But if it's bring your own, what was it, bring your own enhancement? I'm assuming that's where we empower our people through the use of technology.
It's wearables and what have you, Jim. I think that's kind of.
It could be anything from one of the large housing associations that I work with have and they've been doing this for quite a few years now. They've given all of their field workers iPads in order that they can feed back information straight back to the head office very quickly. So it could be that, it could be wearable devices, whatever it is. Yeah. Basically empowering people through technology, which I think is a major theme of today's session, Stephen.
Exactly. Okay, so Paul, thanks for that last one. You made it curious in a few points. So before understanding what more about that is, so yeah, just to start kind of rounding up here, because we've had an interesting set of presentations today. And just to summarise, you know, Jim's been pointing out that COVID has been a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for driving change and transformation. He talked about the 3 of the 4 imperatives and strategy, adaptable approaches needed to deal with these unexpected shocks, uncertainties, but also the unforeseen opportunities that arise. And culture, the need to harness creativity through agile teams. I think we'd all agree with that. That deliver value in months and not years. And in leadership, posing the question about whether leadership has to be reinvented now, given everything we're facing. In Ken's talk, you know, one of the key aspects is that cloud has been a massive game changer for many organisations. So those who were prepared in the cloud before, you know, probably were able to act quicker. But certainly the adoption has increased by 40%. Along with that, you've got cyber attacks going up by 31%. But Ken then outlined, you know, sorts of services that Microsoft provide, and obviously others do provide it on other platforms that can help with that, those threats, those information threats, and the security threats, but ultimately to improve resiliency with that. And again, a very instructive talk from Ken Fox, who explained what they've been facing, what they've been doing, how he's been dealing with burning platforms, and his model for how he runs the organisation there. So it was well conveyed to us. So that's us, ladies and gents. It's been a big topic, and I think we've only scratched a part of it for us all today. There are other key topics around, for example, analytics, modernising applications, which we are planning to address in the future talks. So we will let you know further about that. As guys have said, if there are any questions at all, anything you'd like to discuss with us, there's the email on there. And the final point is that a recording of the session will be made available, and we'll send the link out to you. So again, thanks for your time today, for your contributions. Again, been very interactive, and we find that very encouraging. I think it's helpful for everybody. So thank you, and all the best to you. Goodbye.